Hey, Teddy K here for the Best Buy blog, and in this video review, we take a look at the Samsung Galaxy Note 20 Ultra. This is Samsung's latest flagship smartphone that features the vaunted S Pen and some new features. It's becoming harder to distinguish the Galaxy S line from the Galaxy Note line. In the past, there were two things that always distinguished the Note line from the S, which was the larger screen and, of course, the S Pen. Well, the screen's kind of out of it now because the Note 20 Ultra is the same size screen as that of the Galaxy S20 Ultra. And in fact, actually, the displays are pretty much identical even. So it's not like Samsung really reinvented anything or did anything different with this device. With a 6.9-inch display, Samsung's making it clear that there's now only one differentiating factor between the two, and that is, of course, the S Pen. And the S Pen is really, I would say, the signature feature here. Yes, there is the large screen, and there are some other tweaks that I'm going to get into that I think really make this device very compelling. But the S Pen is, I'm going to start with the S Pen because I think it's really the #1 reason, I think, why you'd probably go with this phone, especially considering that now you have a Samsung device that is the same size, more or less. So the S Pen, we've seen the last couple of years that Samsung has tried to give it something different to do. So, not only are we going to write on it, but we're going to use it for gestures, and things like that, controlling the camera or media playback by using the button. Some of that's still great. I mean, the fact that you can like wake up the screen, or even, the gestures I think are still kind of gimmicky. Like you can now use gestures to go to the home screen or go back, and I guess there are uses for that. I didn't personally find too many for them. I really like the pen more so for controlling media playback, or even snapping a photo with a camera, especially if I have it set up on a tripod and I want to take a shot, I can do that. So those features are still useful, but really what stood out to me was just how much better it feels to write with it. Samsung added some AI. They used some AI here to, I don't know if you can call it the last mile, but certainly the last almost millimeters. So before, there would always be a lag between whenever you wrote on the screen and when the line actually appeared on the screen. You may not have noticed it, but it was always there. Now this time around, the line actually lines up with the tip of the pen, and it's AI kind of filling in that extra gap to make that happen. And it works. It works really well, actually. I mean, if it's the AI guessing what that last little bit is going to be, it's done a really good job of doing it, because this was by far the best time I've had writing on the screen. I would like this more on a tablet because I like the extra real estate, but if you are used to writing on a phone like the Note, you're going to find that this thing is really responsive and the writing is really, really good. There is one other element that helps though, and that is the fact that the screen now has a 120 Hz refresh rate. Yes, the Galaxy S20 Ultra had that too, but that was in perpetuity. So once you turn that feature on, it was always 120 Hz. The downside of doing that was that the battery life would sometimes suffer as a result. So what Samsung did in this case was to make it variable. So it would, in other words, it'll kick in like when it needs to, and then go back to 60 Hz when it doesn't need to. This was actually a very smart idea because the battery life that I've seen on this phone is considerably better, or more consistent, I'll say, than the S20 Ultra. The S20 Ultra never was amazing at battery life. It was good, but this actually stood out to me because, given the size of the screen and all that's going on in here, I wasn't sure what kind of battery life to expect. And, having that feature on is great. Of course, if you do have that feature on, that means that you cannot have the screen's full resolution going too. I didn't really care, personally, that I didn't have the full resolution. The screen looks gorgeous regardless, and the refresh rate I think is a killer feature. It's awesome. It just makes navigating the interface feel really smooth. There's none of that jerkiness, and I love that it kicks in when it needs to, as opposed to just being there all the time. It's fine if it's there all the time, but I just like the fact that it kicks in. So even if you're playing a game, for example, it'll know, hey, you know what, I got to go to 120 Hertz, and it'll do that. Same thing with video, it'll do the same thing too. But I did mention gaming. Unfortunately, I did not get the chance to try this with the Xbox Ultimate Game Pass. I didn't get the controller with the phone, so unfortunately I wasn't able to test that. But this is, from what Samsung is saying, a bona fide mobile gaming machine. I haven't tested it yet, so I can't be sure, but certainly the internal components make it compelling enough to feel like it could be. There's enough processing power and RAM here to do that, and we're talking about console level games. I think Gears of War 5 you know, Forza Horizon. I mean, those types of games that we'll be able to play on here. I can't wait to try it out, but unfortunately I didn't get the chance to. So for the camera, a lot of similarities also apply here from the S20 Ultra as well. The array is the same. There are some minor differences. So for one, the telephoto lens here is a 12 megapixel, and as opposed to the 64 that was used in the other phone. Now, part of the reason for that is because here you're not using one, like there's no 100 times spacing, like that silly feature that was in that other phone. You don't have that here. You have 50 times instead, which is, I mean, even those photos are not even passable in my opinion, but you know, I guess if you want to use it to just kind of get a closer look at something, you can. But moreover, the 108 megapixel sensor is still here, and some of the, you know, I guess some of the benefits of that are here too. Now, it is an elective thing, so it is essentially, it's at 12 megapixels by default, so you have to pick the 108 when you want to shoot with it, and ideally you're shooting with that in, you know, in really good lighting, because the pixels are just so small. So if you want to shoot at night, then you can use the night mode. We'll drop it down to 12 megapixels and you're good to go. Now, the photo quality I think is actually better on this phone than the S20 Ultra, despite all those similarities. And I think part of the reason why is because maybe Samsung dialed back some of that zealous processing that they sometimes apply to these photos. Yeah, they're a little bit saturated. Okay, people seem to like that, but generally I found like there was just better composition. There seemed to be better detail. So, and even with video, I found like video was okay. I shot some video in 8K. This is what you're seeing is not going to be 8K here. It's been, you know, it's been dropped down to accommodate the video, but either way, the 8K video is fine, I guess. I mean, that's a feature I think that's not as useful now as it will be later on. But I will say, I mean, one thing that I did like, although I didn't have a huge problem with this with the S20, is that whole autofocusing issue that a lot of people were bringing up with that phone. It didn't affect me as much personally when I was using that phone, but I definitely noticed that there was an easier and tighter lock on subjects on this phone. So clearly Samsung has fixed that in this case. But there's one thing, I mean, I don't believe that Samsung will not update the S20 Ultra eventually to apply the same features that they tweaked here onto that phone. So I'm not convinced yet that this, you know, some of these camera improvements will be specific and only for the Note 20 Ultra. I do believe at some point the S20 Ultra will probably get all, if not some of those features, especially that autofocus. There are a couple other things that I just really liked about using the phone. I mean, it is a big phone, which you would expect from any Note device, but this one somehow feels somewhat bigger than the S20 Ultra. I don't know how, they're basically the same size. A little bit heavier too, but that's understandable as well. The sound quality is fantastic too. So the AKG tuned speakers are great. There's Dolby Atmos support as well. Plug in a pair of headphones, watch something in Dolby Atmos on Netflix or wherever else, and it's going to sound great. So that's a really nice thing to have as well. I love, I got to say, just aesthetically, the Mystic Bronze really grew on me as a color. It's very nice. It's elegant. It's classy. You can't really go wrong with this. And so aesthetically speaking, the phone is quite nice. It's a little bit boxier, if that makes sense, compared to the S20 Ultra, but and even the Note 20, actually, the model that's below this is a little bit rounder around the edges and the corners. But either way, my one gripe though, I just wish that Samsung would finally just get rid of the curved edges. Just enough. I've never been a fan of them really, and it makes handling a phone like this more difficult. I mean, I mentioned the beauty of it. You got to get a case for this thing anyway. That camera bump is huge, and it's the one thing I was afraid of the most of breaking. More than the screen, I was afraid of this, the camera bump breaking or scratching for some reason. So getting a case that at least levels that off or protects it in some way is probably a really good idea, especially considering just how pricey this phone is. And that's my review of the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra. For the Best Buy blog, I'm Teddy K. Thanks for watching.